Welcome back in. This is Dynasty Mode, the
On a
unofficial EA
Tuesday.
Sports college football game podcast. My name is Arky Shea. He be Dimitri Ravanos. Dimitri, the first time I don't say your name with a very weird guttural scream will be the last time we do this show, I think.
Very good. Arky, can I just tell you how exciting it is to finally be on the Maction schedule for the release of this podcast?
Yes, you can say that. You actually can say that, Dimitri. I'm so excited to be here. As you know, on Tuesdays,
Right.
we changed the date. So those who I did get a couple of people who messaged me were like, "Dude, where's Friday?" And I'm like, "I
What
don't
the
know how
F,
many.
they said.
Yeah, I don't know how many times we got to put it on the podcast or in form of tweets." We moved it to Tuesday because
We
that is
moved
when,
it to
in fact,
Tuesday.
I'm projecting 1 year from today that we will get the release of EA Sports College Football 23. Whether or not it's NCAA football, we'll find out. Who cares at this point? It's just I'm predicting 1 year from today is when we get that. So that's why we moved it
So are
here.
you predicting July 13th, 2023, or are you predicting whatever this Tuesday is?
Whatever
2023.
this Tuesday
All right.
is, the second Tuesday in July is what I'm
I
projecting.
I honestly forget whether or not we had a leap month or a leap year this year. A leap month, yeah. once every 4 years, you get a whole 31 days.
That's right. This will be released on the 13th of Frumptober.
Oh, from Tomber.
That's right. It's you only get this month once every 4 years.
Yep.
And we have to sit through it like another effing Alabama summer. It's great. It's miserable here. But I did
Can I
want to
tell
say
you, last week I was in Seattle. Aside from one day when it got up to 92 up in the mountains, like one day they issued a severe heat warning for a high of 80 degrees. I swear that happened. Like, why every kid from the South is not signing with the Huskies right now, I have no idea.
It makes it, Dimitri, mean more when you earn it and nearly die of heat stroke every summer. That's how you know it. I'm with you. Like I don't know why. I mean, I guess I kind of get it, but like if you sort of developed a Mario Cristobal mentality,
Yeah,
and keep it in Oregon, and then just maybe do 4 days since it's so much nicer there. And maybe you got something. So
there's a reason Oregon has plucked all three of its last three coaches from Georgia and Florida and Alabama.
Oh, and you know what? I'm not even 100% sure that he made the right decision going back to Miami because it's not exactly friendly weather there. So
no. Plus, Arky, if I may throw this out there, no alligators in Oregon.
That I know of. You didn't see any, right?
Like I didn't see any. Yeah, I mean, right? I was in Washington. I assume if they're not in Washington, they must not be in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, they would travel if they did.
Right, exactly.
Like they're a very nomadic creature.
Well, you don't move to that part of the country to just stay in the cities, right? You want to get out. You want to see nature.
Right. And people don't talk about the fact that alligators actually were from like areas like New York and stuff, but they moved down when it got cold.
Right.
They're called green hares.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the science portion of the show.
So, Dimitri, 1 year from today is when I am projecting this comes out. Although I am a little skeptical. I don't know if you saw the tweet from the University of Louisiana in their football program. They tweeted out, in 1 year we'll have the video game, and it had a sort of a back and forth of their stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, hey, that's cool. But that was on a Thursday. And NCAA has been released on Thursdays before. It got me kind of nervous, but it's also a full year away.
I like that you're doing some sleuthing here. I wonder if that is a matter of like they just saw what their stadium looked like rendered for the game. And someone in the social media department was like, put it up! We need it now!
Wait, we can't put up these. No, our stadium. They won't know. Just put it up. Take your iPhone. Do it.
Who's to say what college football video game that came from?
Yeah, exactly right. This could come from Doug Flutie's game. Okay, who knows? It doesn't really matter. Just put it up.
Oh man, can we one day do a whole show on that game?
We absolutely can.
We should do one on that game. I think we determined right through some research. I think we determined the what was it called? Was it called B? Was it BCX, the Black College Football Experience? I think we determined that came out when NCAA was still available. But I would love to do an episode on all the things that tried to fill the void at some point.
Yeah, I have an episode planned, by the way, on the imposters of the college
Oh,
football
very good.
brand going forward. But anyway, I did want to mention one more thing before we get to the meat of this show. And as you can already tell by the top of the screen, if you're reading your podcast episode detail, you know we're talking about the possibility of 2 college football video games, and we'll tell you why we think that is kind of a legitimate sort of scare and concern at this point. I've been doing some more sleuthing besides just on the University of Louisiana's Twitter page, their football team's Twitter page. And
glad after years of asking that you finally branched out.
That's right. I went and looked at our stats so far, like up until the recording of this podcast. Remember, we get to 250 subscribers on YouTube. We'll get a bonus episode. We're at 224 right now. We're getting there.
Oh, that's right. You people are almost fucked.
That's right. So start sharing. But here's why I say this. Between those stats and our podcast stats, there are a few states that we have not hit at all yet.
Ooh, okay.
And this is an open challenge to one of them today. I want anybody who is listening to this via the podcast or checking it out on the old YouTubers, if you know someone who likes the college football video game and is currently in the state of Oregon, get on them. Send this link to them right now, pronto. That's one of the states we haven't hit yet. Oregon, we're dry. And so I'm a little surprised that we're dry for Oregon, but college football in general is kind of a little looser for the passion out west is what we always think in the TV ratings, but it better not be in the video game care about ratings. So send this to someone in Oregon right now. We hit Washington, by the way. We're in California. We're in Arizona. We're not in Oregon. So
it's shocking as much as we talk about their lack of alligators that they have not listened to this show yet.
Yeah, well, we might as well have done the whole first part of the show on them and their lack of alligators.
Right. You get it. You're cool.
Right. So this is a shout out to Oregonians. I don't care who you're a fan of there. Give a shout for the show. Send it to someone right now.
Yep.
All right.
Send it to your grandparents. Tell them you're in it. They won't know.
Yeah, they'll click on it. We'll get credit for it. And we can move on to another state.
Yep.
That's all. Send it to them by accident. I don't care. Like that. Old people will click on anything. That's why my Gma down the street has to constantly ask me if the Facebook messages she's getting is real.
Someone sent it to Justin Herbert's parents. Don't they live in Eugene?
I think they're like 4 seconds from the stadium.
Right. Trust me. I saw the graphics. So every single week during 2019.
They barely showed it.
Right.
They barely showed the line, how the crow flies, how far it is from the stadium to where Justin Herbert's parents live.
I know we got to get going, but this is one of those things that, like, you could do a whole podcast series, not episode. You could make a whole podcast out of the, like, hey, did you know facts that people mentioned every game for a certain team? Did you know Hunter Renfro's career began as a walk-on?
No. Another thing recently close to me was that who was Jarrett Stidham? Did you know Jarrett Stidham was from Texas?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Jarrett's friend, and he has a fiance at the time. I'm sure they're married. Who knows? But it's one of the things, like, the majority of the fans that are watching this were also watching the previous games before. So
right.
You're educating 11 people maybe at each time a game for all of that. But all right, fair enough. Okay, so this episode is all about a real concern of ours, as you've seen over the last, what are we doing, like 12 days now? And who knows what's happening by the time this thing actually publishes at 6 a.m. today. College football landscape has changed a lot. There's been a lot more movements and a lot more rumored movements. And it got into, Dimitri and I were talking about how this has kind of turned into what LSU chancellor once said in 2011. I think it was 11, maybe in 14, that said, we're about to see 2 conferences. It's the ESPN conference versus the Fox conference.
When you
And
and I
all
started talking about, like, reminiscing on that tweet, my first thought was to our conversation with Matt Brown, who talked about the fact that, ESPN would very much like to be a little bit more intimately involved with the game. And then I thought about our episode about, uh, oh gosh, what was the episode itself about? It was about the idea that EA could end up merging with a network. And like, it seems like if we're going to two network owned super conferences, like, what incentive would there be for the two of them to work together?
Well, so this is what's sort of become a fascinating part of our puzzle when it comes to the college football video game, because when you look at the two television companies that we're talking about, they're getting a ginormous chunk of what these media rights are going to be. Whether or not you see some streaming applications, that's going to be minimized compared to the linear options of ESPN and Fox's
Yep.
family of networks. So we started thinking, is there the possibility and a fear that we should have that because of how situated comfortably, might I add, ESPN is with EA Sports and the college football game brand as it is, that this turns into a divisive issue for the game itself?
I think that the fact that this is not officially licensed through the NCAA anymore means that everyone involved has a little bit more agency, and that is probably good for the players. It is probably good the players that actually will be depicted in the game. That is probably good for the institutions. That's not great for the fans. I mean, the fact that the earlier games were licensed by the NCAA meant that EA Sports only really needed the cooperation of one organization. And given what we know about the NCAA, probably of one dude, right? Like, that's probably all they needed in order to make all of this happen. I really do think, how do I say this? I really do fear that we are looking at a future where, you'll have EA Sports college football presented by ESPN. I don't know how they'd word it exactly, but I do fear a future where you have the EA Sports game where you can play with Alabama or Auburn or Oklahoma or Texas. But if you want to have them play a school that we know, say as Northwestern University, it will show up in the game as Evanston, just like the original versions of this game. I fear that there is going to be a version of a college football video game made, let's say, hypothetically, made by 2K, that is college football presented by Fox, where you can play as Michigan. And if you have Vanderbilt coming in for homecoming, it will be Michigan versus Nashville.
By the way, I'd kind of like to see what the Nashville uniforms look like, to be honest with you. And the
You know
team,
what? I was just thinking when I said that, like, one of them, I guess you would have to assume the EA game, because they have a history, would name the college that they can unlicense after the town. The other one, I want them to do like Ken Griffey Jr. baseball on the Super Nintendo, where they gave everything a wacky name that was just a little bit off. So, like, it would be Michigan versus Vanderbilt.
that that works for me, actually. Like, I
I
would
would
be
go get a
okay with
Vanderbilt
that.
hat
Like, if
if that
that's,
happened.
I mean, we're in a dire situation as it is. Like, why not? Michigan's taking on XFL franchises essentially. Like,
That's right. That's right.
so
Yes, Michigan versus the Seattle Dragons.
that's right. I think I think there's a lot of worry with this, because if you look at how the rights are set up right now, first of all, the SEC media rights are for another decade plus with ESPN. They're almost completely done with CBS, right?
Yep.
Um,
After what, 2 more seasons?
I think they got 2 more seasons. The Big Ten this summer is negotiating its next media rights deal, which then you saw USC and UCLA bolts just in the nick of time to start getting some discussions open for them in
Yep.
the new set of negotiations. And it looks like they're looking for two shorter windows, not the, well, I think it was a 13 or 14-year deal that
Mm-hmm.
ESPN put together with ESPN. And then you sort of look at kind of the other teams, which for me feels like that there's a bit of a bargaining chip on the table here when it comes to the video game itself.
It's
Um,
interesting. Walk that out for me a little bit, because the idea itself is interesting. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how you're thinking they have the bargaining chip.
Well, so here's the thing: ESPN essentially is barely in bed with some of the conferences, right? They have a toe in the bed with like the Pac-12,
Right.
and the Pac-12's opened up a brand new sort of set of TV negotiations here recently. We have no idea what they're going to be, right? So we don't know how. Like remember, the Pac-12 started putting on like 4 a.m. games,
Yeah.
right? Just so to try to get people to watch them. So I don't know what the new commissioner there, George Kliavkoff, is going to do. I don't know how good he is at sort of trying to fix this hole that the former commissioner put them in, and Larry Scott with the network, as well as just the disaster that they're just purely in. I
Did you
also
see,
think
by the way, yeah, Damon Bruce, who's a radio host out in San Francisco. So the website Arky and I both work for covers the sports media industry, right? And we put out this tweet, we put out this story that said something to the effect of, like, John McEnroe wants to see less football coverage on ESPN and more in-depth coverage of whatever tennis tournament is going on right now. And Damon Bruce tweeted out the article with the quote, or with the comment that was Larry Scott's strategy too.
That's true. Well, I'd also like this is not a show about how the media that's set up. Like, why do you have multiple channels?
Yeah.
Right, and how do you barely get on any type of
How do you have
like any
multiple
type of?
channels when you can't even get on one cable outlet?
I was about to say, you have almost no business doing with. And I don't know how much you've ever watched the Pac-12 network, but literally, if you're not there, if you're there for like, and I watch a bunch of basketball games and stuff on there, like the commercial breaks are like a enterprise commercial, and then like for, hey, this girl also does stuff at school.
Yeah.
Like this miniature profiles or is
Yep.
like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
This is they did a terrible job. Anyway, so what I'm saying when I talk about the possible bargaining
I
pieces,
just, Arky, just real quick, can I just, to let the Pac-12 network off the hook a little bit?
sure.
Same thing happens on the ACC network.
Okay. Hey, I don't know. They have an awful lot of commercials that show you how to groom yourself with just your finger.
True.
Right. Yeah. Like if it's that small, you can shave an entire beard.
Ooh.
Just goes zip, zip, zip. Done.
They also had commercials running for a while about wooden spatulas. I can't remember what made them special, but it was like, holy shit, they're wooden.
Remember when you guys went to like this plasticky, like non-stick stuff? Wood's back, baby. So
somewhere the yellow fella just went, what? It is?
Prices are pretty good for this. We about to get rich. So the ESPN, for example, is like in bed deep with, despite the fact that it's not covered on the main networks and stuff. They're in deep with like the Sun Belt and with Conference USA and stuff. They have a deep traditional foothold where they pay a lot of money for a while to all of these conferences essentially, and Fox pays a good amount of money for access to one big conference, a smaller amount of money for what's dwindling with the Pac-12, and then a little bit more for the Big 12. But all of that goes to say that now that those two other conferences, the two most recently mentioned, are dwindling, it feels like to me that if we're talking about in terms of a brand new video game, I feel like ESPN has all the leverage to have the best version of this game. It's not because they just have the Southeastern Conference, it's because they're already in the game. And I don't mean like the video game. I mean, they're in the this is their whole thing. It's sports, right?
His rights, yeah.
It's college, and they spend so much money on college athletics rights to broadcast them that they're going to keep those for a long time. They're already in the video game. Now they are in the video game I mentioned with the broadcast announcers.
Yep.
With graphics, with guys who are just coming in, like Reese Davis just coming in and being like, hey, Florida, they're about to play. Go to the field.
And remember, Matt Brown said that at least two folks that we know of, two folks we associate heavily with ESPN college football, are signed for the next game.
Yeah, and I assume, we talked about this before, I think, on an episode. Matt Brown's episode is number 6, by the way. number 7 was our reaction. I think number 7 on that episode, we talked about how we thought, one of those names is Kirk Herbstreit.
Yep.
And as much as he's going to be doing Amazon football this year for the National Football League, he's ESPN for us. Like,
Yeah.
he's college football. That's what it's going to take a long time for him not to be that, especially since he's also doing that. So I think if we get to the point where there's a fracturing of rights to where only so many teams are going to be allowed in these, I should say, semi super conferences. There's 2 big ones, and then there's, whoever else comes out from it. ESPN in a really, really good position to have the game that you would actually ultimately want.
Sure, I don't disagree. They would definitely have more of the product you want, but if there's a college football game and Ohio State's not in it, it's still not a very good product. Even
No,
if the only thing it's missing is the Big Ten. And
but it's the vice versa. Like, if you have the Ohio State game and Georgia's not in it, it's not the same.
That's kind of what I was going to get to next is if there was a new college football game and it had everything but the Big Ten, and you're trying to figure out well, okay, how do I embrace this universe where there is no whiteout game in Happy Valley? There is no slapping the Go Blue banner as Michigan runs out onto the field. There are no, these multiple big historic college football brands. All right, that feels weird. That I don't like it, but you can live with it. But then the alternative would be a video game that is only the Big Ten? Only the Big Ten and the Pac-12?
Yeah, well, it also would depend on how big these super conferences get, right?
Right.
There's been discussion that, I think it was John Skipper, former head of ESPN, was on the Dan Le Batard podcast to talk about these 4 16-team super conferences sort of creating their own sort of thing, their own playoff, where they just
see, my fear rests on the fact that we're not talking about 16. I don't think it matters to the SEC or to the Big Ten to be at 16. I think we're at 16 on our way to 24.
Well, exactly. And I think, we're looking at this in the terms of how do we get to a nice round number that makes sense to us, when we should be looking at is who's trying to gobble up the most amount of money possible from these 2 television networks. And that's where the negotiation goes forward. And when it comes to these media rights, I wonder if you start getting the Big Ten and Fox Sports and ESPN saying part of your media rights is that we want media rights to your simulation, right?
We want all media rights.
We want your simulation football rights, which right now, the schools can sort of go with, for the majority of they can choose to go with whoever they want to license that. That's part of what EA asked for everywhere. It's can we get the rights for simulation football to use your logo? And
I really do love the idea that we are getting towards a future where there will only be I'm trying to think of a video game Blizzard, right? That's a popular video game company. Blizzard presents Idaho college football.
It's not the furthest thing from the truth at this point, right?
Right.
It feels like the way we've heard things discussed, from networks merging to share content from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Yep.
I guess people don't have televisions. I don't know. So, is it a delayed feed? Is that what happens? It's like the late local news. You get on the West Coast when you want Jay Leonard to come on. That's topical. So we're not far from that because of how much discussion is around it. Because I think when you saw Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC, you're like, okay, that makes sense. Why they would do a bunch of money, blah, blah, blah. Some people hate it. I do personally, but whatever. The Big Ten getting teams from California. Now we're talking about more than just the theoretical, hey, does somebody want BYU, for example? It comes into, now we're talking about a national play where literally the borders of anything, they kind of didn't matter before with West Virginia being in the Big 12. They really don't matter if you're doing, Rutgers versus UCLA in October.
Look at, the Big 12 is a good example. The talk of the 6 Pac-12 teams that are going to go to the Big 12, or at least are in discussions with the Big 12. That would give the Big 12 at least one team in every single time zone. Every single time zone. Like, that's bananas.
Yeah, and by the way, we're still not even talking about a Big 12 that features like UCF coming in a minute,
Right.
right? Like we're still talking about like current Big 12, but like there's a new Big 12 that's still to happen like in like 2 years,
Yep.
and there's gonna be a newer Big 12 probably that comes like right after that, or maybe right on top of it. It's just this is where it does worry me because, well, I should let me put the kibosh on that for a second. I think I'm very fascinated to see how EA does this next game. For a lot of reasons. One, it's pretty cool to play. But two, the biggest reason now for me is what else has been incorporated from other entities. You know, Matt Brown did allude to the fact that there might be more personalities that become a part of the game, not necessarily as commentators, but you might see them in
Sure.
other features of the game. That if you don't see, for example, some type of Fox content or Fox personalities intertwined, then you see a real like struggle for a very powerful piece of what is the college football brand at this point, because everyone is trying to get the type of person that plays video games like this to buy their stuff.
Right. Right. I mean, from an entertainment standpoint, we're talking almost a decade at this point that video games blew by movies in terms of revenue generation for year over year. I think one thing that gives me some comfort, and understand this could change. I'm talking in 2022 terms. By the time that we are talking about these super conferences, we're at least 5 years down the road at this point.
Yeah.
One thing that gives me some comfort is that I look at the EA game and the EA's game's relationship with ESPN historically and what it will be in the future. Like, I think a big part of the reason that it is important for ESPN and EA that actual players sign on for the NIL deals that actually put them in this game is then it opens up Sports Center segments where we're talking about who the perfect 99s are in the game. Or we're talking about, here are the top 10 quarterbacks in NCAA football or college football. FS1 doesn't seem interested in that. Given the way FS1 is constructed right now and the fact that the main entity for college football on Fox is the network, which is not a sports network and certainly would not be devoting time to video games, I don't know that, at least the way Fox Sports as an entity is structured right now, I don't know that there is enough incentive for them to hold the Big Ten at a arm's length away from EA and ESPN or from whoever is making college football games in the future. I just kind of wonder, everything is an investment, right? Every game or every business, right? You are doing the math of, is it worth putting in? Is what I'm going to get out worth what I have to put in? Is there going to be a conversation about, does Fox want so much for the Big Ten's football simulation rights that EA and ESPN decide, you know what, it doesn't, the math doesn't work out, and we just move on? And then maybe do we still only get one game? That game is just incomplete.
Excuse me,
Arky, no.
There are two big concerns with that, and you just named them. Like, which kind of version could we possibly get? Now, technically, it could all mean for naught, right? Like, these schools could retain their simulation rights and want to go to just one brand with EA. It could continue to do what they're doing, and it could make sense that way. But when we're talking about an environment where every single thing is being gobbled up for content, for rights distribution, when every single thing is on the table, the reality of two different games featuring especially those two big conferences we've been talking about is more real than I want it to be.
Yeah.
At this point. And that, like, so EA doesn't usually do their licensing like year by year. It's usually for a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years at a time. I think they were doing it 1 year at a time once the Ed O'Bannon stuff started to happen, and they would just go year by year by year for a couple of conferences. The SEC was one of those that only licensed sort of their conference, and then the universities within for like a year at a time when it seemed like this may go badly for us, so let's not re-up this for long term. But if VA sort of secures these rights for a while, it does buy us some time to sort of figure out what would happen with all of these new media rights, because the Big 12 still has to do their media rights. The Pac-12 is trying to do theirs right now, and so Fox may have a hand in those two conferences majorly, or still, or not at all.
I mean,
So,
Arky, let's not forget that, Apple is involved. Amazon is involved.
well,
What if they want to do their own thing? Here's the other part too. Yeah, CBS is losing the SEC. Does that mean they want to lose college football entirely? Like, what if they make a push for whether it's the second half of the Big Ten rights, whether it is the Big 12, Pac-12 rights, like whatever the bigger conferences that comes out of that shakeup. I mean, I guess then the fear is, are we talking about 3 games? But really, I think you talked about EA buying itself some time, buying all of us that love this game some time with the length that they negotiate for. I would hope that they use that time to build a bridge with Fox, to build a bridge with, CBS, NBC, Apple, Amazon, whoever it's going to be, to say, what do we need to include from you to make you and your teams still want to be a part of this? Because we understand that the college football culture, and this is where it gets tough when you're talking about rights. The college football culture makes ESPN imperative, but also the college football culture is not about loyalty to one network, right? Like, there is no, oh, well, if Alabama's playing on CBS, I'm not watching because I can't stand
right.
I just
That would
can't
be
stand Gary
amazing, by the
Daniels.
way. Is
What's
that
that?
a Fox game with Texas? Nope.
Oh, trust me, I am very much looking forward to the Texas game to see all of the good Southern liberals I grew up with suddenly get very coded in their language about who is this guy calling the game.
You know what else I love about that
He's not old money, I can tell you that.
is that Fox made that their big noon kickoff, right?
Yep.
And I don't think there was one person outside of myself that loved the idea of that game being like the first game on, like, who, like, you go from big noon, like you go from the Reggie Bush Matt Leinart show with probably Urban Meyer, then you go
I
straight
believe they are renaming it the Urban Meyer Show.
right. Then he goes straight into Alabama, Texas. I know you want it to be at 7:00, but who
No,
cares?
you don't.
It's the
Listen,
first game you get to see. Would you rather watch another noon Big Ten game,
I
or could
fight
you
about
see
this.
yourself watching a little 11 a.m. Central Time, Alabama, Texas? I don't care how hot it is; it's hot always.
I fight about this with my buddies from college all the time. Like, I'm sorry, like, I don't want to stay up till 2 a.m. Like, or if I'm staying up till 2 a.m, that's Hawaii time. I don't.
I am loyal to a team.
That's
in
right.
that time slot.
That's,
Go Bows.
That's right.
Now, it's not a network. It's usually Facebook I'm watching it on. That's fine by me. I just get my Bows. That's all I care.
Arky, I can tell you're not a real fan. Otherwise, you would know it is the Team One app.
Well, they have to have stream games on Facebook.
Like, they have in the past, yeah, but now you got to have the Team One app.
Oh, well.
Listen, I'm just putting it out there because I want people to understand how much I suffer.
On the podcast, if you didn't see it, it was me mockingly air quoting Dimitri right. Just there. Okay, so I want to wind this down.
By the way, have we penetrated Hawaii?
Oh, you know what? I'd have to go back and look. I don't think we're in Hawaii, but I do not know. I just wanted to name that organ first. I have a whole list, but I don't have it updated as of, like, I know the one state I wanted to get today, but I haven't marked off as of like today out of who may have been marked off besides that. So
listen, I have 2 good friends in Hawaii, but also, you know who I want to be our listener in Hawaii? Timmy Chang.
Man, Timmy, look, we are the biggest Timmy Chang fans. Like, there is no other podcast that's going to talk as lovingly about Timmy Chang.
That's right.
As this podcast.
That's right. This was once said to me on a past college football podcast I did. A direct quote: "Dimitri, why does everything come back to Cole McDonald with you?" Like, that's my love of Hawaii.
Which makes you think, I'd have to hear some more of these conversations to get these all the way back to. Okay, so let me sort of wind this down with one question here. If we're forced to have what is essentially 2 games, let's say it's an NCAA football and a college football game, right? Are you buying 2 games? And I don't care about which one because I would assume you're going to buy the one that has Alabama in it. Like I would too because it'd be the same conference. Because
I'll buy the one with FIU and Hawaii in
you're wealthy, you're probably going to get the FIA app, right?
it.
um,
Yeah,
I'll
I mean
never get over the
it's a
fact
good
that FIU
question.
is having pads donated to it from Mississippi State. They're like, these are way too old.
Dude, like we're gonna get to a point where Conference USA is having old stadiums donated to them. I mean, like the collection of teams in that conference is just pathetic.
That's not nice to say.
No, it's not
Okay?
nice to say, but it is honest.
It's not dishonest.
That's
And
right.
that's how I like to put that conversation to a bed.
I mean, all right.
Two,
So to your question, are you invested in 2 games? It's a good question because honestly, Arky, and I'm not being silly here. I'm being very serious when I say this. I can't say I wouldn't. I don't think I
really?
would, but I can't dismiss the idea that I would.
Because I feel like so the reason I'm wearing this hat right now is because I just came out of practice
Right.
For my Panthers, right? And we've got
Good call.
we've got I gotta be honest with you. It's not a great team, okay?
No, sure.
Like they don't hear this podcast. It's fine. Like our best player is a fullback, if that helps you, okay? So it's not the greatest thing in the world.
Line
But
him up at quarterback, Arky.
um I don't want to badmouth a kid that's going to help us win some games this year. I was going to say he's very mobile. He's oftentimes accurate. He can run a zone read really effectively.
You know what I'm hearing, Arky?
Against our defense, which is the worst defense so far in practice.
You know what I hear when you say that? I hear wing T. I hear the triple.
I'm not interested in divulging anything in July when we have games coming up in July. So, so you'll see when the game comes. By the way, this is going to be a good year. I feel it. No, the real thing is for me to invest in 2 games is a lot to ask of me personally.
So, like, I think you're going to get to exactly what I'm saying is like the people that are really waiting on this game probably have kids now, probably have a job now.
Oh, that's my cue to keep talking.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not even just that. It's just like to me, I'm a singular storyline kind of guy when it comes to something like Dynasty Mode, right?
Oh,
So,
I thought you were talking about your obligations. You're saying you're
no,
just kind
no,
of a
no,
ding dong.
no. Who need the kid's fine? He can run around. He can hit stuff on his own.
Sure, I saw him the other day. He looked great.
Yeah, he's practically feral. He's good. Okay, so all I need, like for mentally, like to me, to make a leap from being like the head coach of Georgia State, who will be in the game, I'm assuming for ESPN at this point, versus the head coach of like Washington State, who might be in
right.
Like to me, especially when there's no crossover, it would I would have the last version of whatever this series of games comes out with and probably not go back until they renegotiated and figured that out. I don't know if I could be okay with playing as the Florida Gators taking on the East Lansing Pirates.
Right.
It just for me, I think that's a bridge too far.
Would they be the East Lansing? They'd be the East Lansing Trojans, right? Like you would try and get as close to it as possible.
Or you just go completely different. Like I don't know. Like
yeah, there's their mascot, Sparky.
That's right. One letter. There's no, and he still has the helmet, right? Yep. He still has the helmet. He's still ripped. Like it's just different coloring, a different shade of green.
Yeah.
By the way, there's a controversy with the college football video game. The Michigan State's green wasn't the right green a couple years before the last version. Yeah.
I could believe that because I have often wondered, and this is just my naked eye, right? So I'm not making an accusation here. I've often wondered if they have the right shade of crimson for Oklahoma.
You've wondered that, okay?
I have, because it looks a little bit too bright to me.
I could see that, but I also like here's the thing for me, like with all these new gen uniforms and helmet combinations. For me, it's hard to even know what's real anymore.
That's right. Like Michigan State's green now is neon for all you know.
Yeah, it's like that's you can't complain anymore about jersey color than options anymore. Like if it's anywhere near the color wheel of green,
Right.
like you're
There
good.
is a select group of schools. Obviously, people think about Oregon, but like Oklahoma State is in this too, where like you literally have no leg to stand on if you're saying that's not one of our uniforms, because how the fuck do you know?
Exactly. There is no reason you know anywhere near the exact number of uniform combinations that you have, because no one does.
Yeah, exactly.
Phil Knight doesn't know. Okay,
That's right.
no one's going to possibly know. Before we wrap it up, I do want to plea out there. Here's a plea to those who are still with us in the podcast. As you know, my career is starting as the offensive coordinator as the Georgia State Panthers. I've been told by Coach Martindale that I'll be able to give some press conferences after games. They're brief. They're brief press conferences because coordinators don't usually do this. Stop laughing,
Sure.
Dimitri. This is real life. So if you would be interested in being a reporter to ask me post-game questions, I have a way for you to be able to do it. But I'm only taking a handful of people at most.
It's called pretend.
That's
Dimitri.
The way. Dimitri is. I thought I muted him. I didn't clearly. So DM me on Twitter. That's the fastest way to get to me. You can comment on the YouTube. I'll probably get to it. But DM me on Twitter at Arkyshe. It's on the screen there. It's at ARKYSHEA. And if you're interested, I'll tell you how you can sort of submit audio recordings and ask me questions after the post game and have the videos then go to YouTube. By the way, the videos of the gameplay and the post game press conferences and whatever else happens, they will be on the same feed as this here podcast is, but it won't be on the podcast feed, if that makes sense. It'll be on the video feed, but I won't be sending it out, when you download it on your Apple or Google or Spotify. So if you're interested, I need people to ask me questions. I think I'm not going to run out of questions on my own, but I could use some more voices.
I tease you about this not because I think doing it makes you foolish, but letting people know you do it is insanity. Like, is it like this is the kind of thing to be done in the privacy of your bedroom?
Oh, it used to be. Oh, it used to be, baby. Go back to episode 1. We talked all about that when I was busted doing a press conference on myself in the bathroom after a game. By the way, it was a tough loss. I'll never forget it. It's the only reason I cannot, for any stretch of me, no matter who they play, think kindly of Notre Dame. So that's all that needs to be said about that in the year of our Lord 2007. So, Dimitri, I think that's it. I have. Let me just one last thing before we go.
Sure.
Scale of 1 to 10. How likely do you think that this is a real concern? How likely are you? How concerned are you, 1 to 10, that this will become a thing at some point?
At some point, 5 to 6. I mean, it's more than not, but I also recognize.
I'm a solid 6 on that. Like it's not the craziest thing because it's clear no one cares about tradition, right?
Right.
No one cares about tradition.
And why should you? It's okay that people don't care about the tradition to me.
Yeah. No one. Look, I'll tell you this. The biggest thing that makes me happy is that the Rose Bowl got told to F off, basically, which is a nice little, to you on the side end for a bowl that's like, we have to play at 3.
I can't wait until they add Kansas and then you get a traditional Rose Bowl matchup of like Kansas, Colorado. I'm just real quick. What I'll say is the reason it is lower is because I recognize this isn't going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year. It probably won't happen in 5 years, but it is something I worry could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate these. I don't pocket watch people for the most part, but conferences I do a little bit. Leave the game alone.
No, businesses, it is your responsibility as a citizen to pocket watch.
Why that's what I said. Like businesses, I'll be a little like, just leave the EA game alone. Like, or just figure out a way where you all can opt in and all be happy. If you need, you got to give me a Gus Johnson or a Joel Klatt or something. Whatever, it's fine by me. I'm cool with all that.
Yeah,
just don't make it where you have to keep using this as negotiation rights to get more money so we suffer.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. All right, Dimitri, wrap it up for the good people. Say goodbye.
Save and sip to next week, everyone.